Welcome back, Irish fans, to Breaking On Braves Boys podcast. It's official. Blake Wesley is the first one and done in Notre Dame men's basketball history. Tonight he was selected by the San Antonio Spurs at the 25th overall pick. Slipped a little bit farther than I thought he would. Thought he would go early 20s, but also knew it was a possibility he would slip based on some of the project kind of comparisons for him. But good spot for him overall with the Spurs, a team that has a good history of development. I'm going to get more into the fit with the Spurs, but a couple days back before the draft, I talked about what having a one and done means for Notre Dame and what it means for Blake Wesley. So gonna kind of put a Notre Dame spin on it. Talked about it here. So tune in here for a second, and then I'll go into the Spurs fit. And there it is. Hometown hero, South Bend native Blake Wesley is officially an NBA player and officially the first one and done in Notre Dame men's basketball program history. So huge feather in Notre Dame and Mike Bray's cap, huge feather in Blake Wesley's cap, obviously. Obviously, this was his moment, his night, and a very exciting time for him. But going to kind of look into how this affects Notre Dame, kind of spin this in a Notre Dame direction. Obviously, Blake Wesley going to go into his fit with his respective team later on, but Notre Dame gets a big recruiting tool here. Curtis Williams Jr., a 2023 recruit. I think he's top 50 in the country at the moment. Guy who has really played well on the UIVL circuit, and a guy that Notre Dame has interest in, has brought up Blake Wesley. And if Notre Dame can keep pitching that and use this could be a huge tool for them to kind of get on the level of a Syracuse, a school like Wake Forest who had 2 first-rounders this year. Notre Dame doesn't lose out on that pitch now. Those schools are pitching, hey, we can make you an NBA player. Notre Dame has had NBA players in the past, but they haven't been able to pitch that they're a pipeline to the NBA. And I wouldn't say they're a pipeline to the NBA now, but all those other schools pitching that, Notre Dame can say now, hey, we had a one and done too, and he was ranked outside the top 100 as a high schooler. He was a guy who a lot of teams, Purdue didn't even keep a scholarship open for him. So Notre Dame found a guy, even if he kind of fell into their laps. They found Blake Wesley. They let him rock out in their system, let him kind of play his own game, let him develop on the floor and show what he could do in front of NBA teams. They didn't bog him down with a super tight offensive system. They let him be free-flowing, let him do what he wanted to do. And this is a prime example of what Notre Dame can do for guards. And if they're smart, they will pitch this and show other guards what Blake Wesley did in their system, what a guy like J.J. Starling is going to do in their system, and show them that if they're good enough, they can come in and play as a freshman like Blake Wesley did. They can go to the NBA like Blake Wesley did if they're good enough. And the system's not going to hold them back. Mike Bray's not going to hold them back. And kind of the way he went about the process is going to show you that he wants you to play in the NBA. And this is a huge help for Notre Dame, obviously, especially with the recruit profile Blake Wesley had, the way he kind of broke out. And I don't think – that was all the coaching staff. I think a lot of that was just Blake Wesley being underrated for whatever reason. Some say COVID. I say that's a BS excuse because Blake Wesley played a lot more AAU than a lot of prospects in his class and still didn't get bumped up the rankings. Actually got downgraded in the rankings while he was playing and other people were not playing. So I think that's a little bit of a BS excuse, but kind of going back to it, this is a huge night for Notre Dame, and it's not just a night where Mike Bray can hang out in the green room with Blake and his family. This is a night where Mike Bray gets a legitimate recruiting tool in his pocket, a legitimate feather in his cap that he can say he had a one-and-done player. And although it's not a Sweet 16 level accomplishment for Notre Dame, like it would have been if they had beat Texas Tech in the final moments, it is a huge win for Notre Dame and something they can use to get future wins down the road. Like I said, Curtis Williams is already brought up Blake Wesley's success when talking about what he likes about Notre Dame. And a lot of schools Notre Dame is recruiting against are going to have players like that. Wake Forest has probably 2 first-rounders tonight. Duke has a few as well, and I don't think they're going to turn into a NBA pipeline like Duke is, but they're certainly a school that now has shown, especially if you're a guard, you can come in and you can become an NBA player in our system. And we're going to let you have the freedom to do that if you're good enough. And Mike Bray and staff did a nice job with Wesley's career, Blake Wesley's talked a lot about how Mike Bray was almost a perfect college coach for him. And huge win for Blake Wesley, obviously, huge night for him that a lot of people didn't see a few years ago, but now Blake Wesley always saw that. If you talk to Blake Wesley, his junior, senior year of high school, you could tell that he knew this was going to happen. And a lot of people around him thought he was delusional, thought it wasn't going to happen, and it did. So huge win for Blake Wesley, and also a big win for the Notre Dame men's basketball program, who now has the first one and done in school history. So big feather in everybody's cap tonight, and that's what tends to happen when you have a first-round pick. Good things tend to happen when you have a first-round pick in your school, and now it's time to see if Notre Dame can make that into a ripple effect. Can J.J. Starling go next year? Can they start to land players of that caliber again? We'll see, but again, huge night for Notre Dame, and huge shout out to Blake Wesley for obviously always believing that this was going to happen, even when a lot of people didn't even start the year at Notre Dame as a starter, and turned into a first-round pick. So a lot to like here at all angles, and big night for Blake Wesley. Now we're going to talk about kind of how he fits into his team and kind of how his slot affects his career. So here we go. All right, so on to the Spurs and kind of how Wesley fits into the Spurs and why I like the fit of the team he's at. Going into the draft, I don't know if you'd believe me, but I actually said the Spurs were the team I would prefer that Blake Wesley ends up with. And looking at their depth chart, it's obviously not ideal. DeJounte Murray is under contract through 2024, although there's rumors they'll trade him. Josh Richardson, I guess, would be kind of a guard, even though he's a little older. Lonnie Walker's probably going to walk. Devin Vassell is on the roster. Josh Primo, Romeo Langford, Keldon Johnson, who a little more of a swingman, but he's a 6'6" guy. Trey Jones, Joe Wieskamp. A couple guards on the roster, and a lot of young guards on the roster as well. They also just took Malachi Branham right before Blake. So it's not a place where Blake's going to walk in and they're going to need him to come play immediately. And on one hand, that kind of sucks for him because he's not going to be able to come in and play meaningful NBA minutes more than likely. At least he's going to have to scratch and claw for those minutes if he's going to get them. He's going to have to beat some guys out. But looking at kind of the way the Spurs have developed guards, I think you can kind of look past that and think about why this could be a good spot. And I kind of dislike when people kind of just go with a narrative that a team develops players well and say, oh, they're going to develop this guy well because they developed guys in the past well and turned them into good players. But if you look at the Spurs, two of their best players, DeJounte Murray and Keldon Johnson, I guess to an extent, mostly DeJounte Murray though, are players who came out with similar profiles to Blake Wesley. DeJounte Murray came out of Washington as a guy who could get downhill, who could create his own shot, solid athlete, maybe not the Blake Wesley type athlete, but good athlete. But the one question with DeJounte Murray was his shot. I think Keldon Johnson, I don't remember him as much as a prospect, but I do think he's somewhat similar to Blake Wesley, long, athletic, maybe a little bit of a project coming out of Kentucky. But the Spurs actually have probably the best shooting coach in the NBA, Chip Ellingand, who was also referred to as the shot whisperer, key developer of Kawhi Leonard, obviously a big developer of DeJounte Murray and a big part of why he has turned into the player that he has, who came out with a similar profile to Blake Wesley. So did Keldon Johnson, and those guys have turned into good, solid NBA players. And DeJounte Murray's probably going to fetch some big assets if he has, and he was developed by the Spurs throughout the year. So really like the fit for Blake Wesley in terms of how the Spurs can develop him. And he even mentioned it in his presser right after the draft that, hey, this is an organization I like because they have a track record of developing guys, and I believe in what they're going to do. And I think you can see why he would believe that. They have one of their coaches called the shot whisperer, and Blake Wesley, maybe one of the biggest things he needs to work on is the shot, just his mechanics, being more fluid in his shot. And a shooting coach like that is certainly going to help him. Any shooting coach in the NBA would have helped him. But this one in particular, I think, feels a little bit different, feels a little more like, hey, this guy can actually, like, really help his jump shot and turn him into a good NBA shooter. And Blake Wesley, I think, is going to get on the floor with his defense at first. Maybe not this year, but when he first starts getting playing time, he will get on the floor with his defense. but to really stick in the NBA, he's going to have to finish around the rim and shoot better. And the Spurs, I think, are going to help him at least with shooting. And he's going to, as he gets more experience and sees more NBA type bodies in the lane, he's going to get better at finishing. And I haven't even brought up Greg Popovich yet, who is obviously arguably the best NBA coach of all time. So a lot to like with this. And despite the logjam of sorts with young guards, this is still a team that I think Blake Wesley could come in and contribute in. Maybe not this year. I think this year may be a year where he's got to at least spend some time in the G League. You saw Josh Primo do that last year for the Spurs. They're not afraid to take upside swings on guards and trust their development system, and I think that's a really good sign. But maybe not this year for Blake Wesley, but when he does become a regular contributor in the NBA, the Spurs, I think, will set him up best to be a good one of those. So really looking forward to seeing how Blake Wesley's career pans out, and I'll be back with some more Notre Dame content soon. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll be back soon. Peace.